bills are only to read, not to implement.
So there are two important points I wish to say in a response to the members. The first is a constitutional issue which has been raised, and I'll respond it. And secondly, in substance, what Mr. Saugat Roy and others have said. Any bill can be opposed on two grounds. It either lacks legislative competence, the Parliament, or it violates the basic structure or fundamental rights in the context of an ordinary legislation and basic structure as far as the constitutional amendment is concerned. Now, none of the objections comes within that parameter.
Federal principles, it is violated.
In fact, let me remind the honourable member that this bill, on the context of how taxation is to be levied, has earlier been introduced. It has been cleared by the standing committee, and it has been the good luck of this parliament and the country that conventionally West Bengal was the greatest supporter as far as this bill was concerned. Therefore, if there is any change in thinking, I do not know. In fact, it was the efforts of Mr. Asim Das Gupta who not only conferred with chief ministers, I remember he's having even met me on some occasions when I was the leader of opposition, in order to mobilize support for this bill. On substance, I have just two things to say to allay any fear that you have. The object behind the GST, which will probably be, and it was mooted in 2006 by the UPA budget, originally conceived by Vajpayee ji, pushed by both the UPA finance ministers, that let there be a seamless transfer of goods and services across the country. Let there be no tax on tax. So if you have multiple taxations imposed, the burden and the procedural complications increase. And indefinitely on the destination principle, the tax is at a last stage. Now, one legitimate fear which was there, and therefore I am not going to rush through with this, what Mehtab ji said. Though the standing committee has cleared it, I have discussed it repeatedly, Mr. Chidambaram had discussed it repeatedly with the empowered committee and the state governments. I have met several chief ministers and finance ministers and discussed with them individually also. There are several safeguards we've added to this. Procedurally, I called the meeting on a last occasion on Friday. Finance ministers expressed some 3 or 4 points of concern. Then a smaller group came and met me, which comprised of people from various political parties, but they came really speaking in one voice. On Friday, we arrived at a near consensus, but they wanted to see the draft amendment. Somebody had to go back to Calcutta, so he couldn't join them, which was not really a problem that I created. Though I read a statement to the contrary, but I don't want to get into that small issue. Then they came back to me on Monday. Representatives of Tamil Nadu and Karnataka also joined them. And in this smaller group, finally the draft constitution amendment was shown. And these meetings went on for hours together. And thereafter, they wanted some change in the languages, which was to give more liberal rights to the states. I accommodated their concerns. And even now, the intention, Mr. Mehtab, is not to push it through. Whether a standing committee is again required or not required is a separate issue. But we want this to be debated after it is introduced, the draft to be out, so that anybody has suggestions to offer, I am willing to accept that. We have made sure that no state will lose a rupee of revenue. It will be a win-win situation where they will gain revenue. This bill, amongst other factors, and I'll just give you 3 factors to... Service tax today is entirely in the domain of the centre. So today it is going to be shared with the states. Now places like Maharashtra, where 1/3 of the national service tax comes from Maharashtra, when we share it with them, it more than takes care of the octroi absorption into the GST. The service tax from Bangalore and Karnataka, it more than takes care. Additionally, we will make sure that for some period, 2 years, a 1% additional tax is permitted to the states. And even then, the consuming states are all going to benefit. If some producing state for some period loses some money, in the Constitution amendment itself I have provided that for 5 years there is a mechanism, first 3 years entirely, then on a tapering basis, the centre will assure them to compensate them for any loss which has been suffered. As far as the past is concerned, from 2010 to 2013, the GST compensation which was payable to the states, amongst the various debts which have been left behind on my table by the UPA, this is one of them. They have not paid. In the discussion on the demands for supplementary grants, I have already said I intend to honour that commitment which the UPA had made, and therefore the first installment in that repayment also I will try and pay in this financial year itself. So we will make sure that no state loses. All states are going to gain more. And our policy, as far as our government is concerned, one of the objects behind replacement of the Planning Commission is that a large number of schemes which mandatorily go as central schemes to the states should go directly to the states. That's empowering the states. When we have taken in the coal bill, ordinance which you have approved, that the coal producing states, which include 4 states which need help, West Bengal, Odisha, Jharkhand, Chhattisgarh, a large part of the revenue will go to the states itself, what comes from the auction. We are interested in strengthening the states, only then the national economy is strengthened, and therefore when the bill is taken up for discussion, perhaps in the next session, we will make sure that the interest of every state is well looked after in this, and I will be open to all suggestions till the very last minute.